The cemetery horror stories you're about to hear will prove that some boundaries should never be crossed. That among forgotten graves and silent statues lie secrets that don't want to be disturbed. Like in the story you're about to hear, where a group of friends looking for some thrills decided to explore an old graveyard. But their little game took a dark turn when a tombstone got knocked over, and then moved back on its own to collect what they owed. Before we begin, make sure you're subscribed so you never miss a terrifying tale. That night, we had absolutely nothing to do. It was one of those boring Saturdays, you know? Everyone was already sick of the same conversations, the same jokes, and even the same park bench where we always hung out. There I was with Ryan, Mike, and Joshua, sitting there trying to come up with something to make the night worthwhile. Joshua was restless, fiddling with his phone the whole time. Ryan just kept complaining that the town was boring, and Mike always came up with some weird ideas. It was him who blurted out, "What if we went to the old cemetery? I bet you guys don't have the guts." We laughed, but it was that kind of laugh where nobody really found it funny. The cemetery he was talking about was in a remote part of town, near the old road where nobody lived anymore. It was one of those cemeteries forgotten by time, where no one visited the graves and everything seemed abandoned for decades. Curiosity got the better of us, and the truth is we wanted to feel something different, anything. We grabbed our bikes and went. The trail there already gave off a strange feeling. The trees seemed to close in on the path. The wind rustled the leaves, making that whispered sound nobody likes to hear in the dark, and the moon seemed like it was following us. When we reached the rusty gate, it was already slightly ajar, as if it had been waiting for someone. We entered, half laughing, half in silence, and then the strangeness hit. The place was completely overgrown. The tombstones were crooked, covered in moss, some barely legible. There was a strong smell of damp earth and a heavy silence, as if the air was thicker in there. We walked among the graves, cracking jokes, trying to show that everything was fine, until Mike pointed to a cracked, leaning tombstone and said, "I dare you to knock that one over." At first, I thought it was just a joke, but he insisted, and then the others started laughing and egging me on. That stupid teenage dare to show off. I went for it. I kicked the base of the tombstone and it didn't budge. I kicked it again, and this time it wobbled. On the third try, I heard a dry crack, and the stone simply toppled over, breaking apart on the ground. An eerie silence followed. No one said anything for a few seconds. Then Ryan laughed, but it was clear it was forced. Joshua made a lame joke to break the tension, and Mike said, "See? It wasn't that hard." But the truth is, none of us felt comfortable there. The broken tombstone seemed wrong, like we had crossed a line, and yet we pretended it was nothing, just another prank of the night. That's when we decided to leave. As we walked back to the gate, each of us tried to pretend everything was fine. Ryan cracked forced jokes, Joshua tried to laugh too loudly, and Mike, despite being the bravest until then, had a distant look in his eyes. I didn't say anything. I had a strange feeling in my chest, like I had done something I shouldn't have. And even though it was just a stone, just an old, forgotten tombstone, it felt like we had touched something that should have been left in peace. We left there walking fast, almost running, as if something had started following us. No one wanted to admit it, but you could feel that no one wanted to look back. When we passed through the gate again, the air seemed lighter, but the silence between us remained. We each went our separate ways without saying goodbye. It seemed like each of us wanted to forget what had happened. The next morning, I woke up to my mom calling me from the gate. Her voice was tense, nervous. I went downstairs, half dazed, thinking it was something with the dog or the car. But when I reached the front door, my body froze. There it was. The same tombstone, the one I had knocked over, with the crack down the middle and everything, leaning right against the door frame, as if someone had placed it there carefully. Or worse, with intention. My mom looked at it in disbelief. "Do you know what this is? Who did this, for heaven's sake?" My dad appeared right behind her, and when he saw the stone there, he turned pale. He said it was a sick joke, that someone must be trying to scare us, but you could see in his eyes that he didn't really believe it. I tried to say something, but nothing came out. I could only shake my head and say I didn't know anything. Inside, I was panicking. It didn't make sense. How did that tombstone get from the cemetery to my house? Who would do that? How? At that moment, I realized we had messed with something that didn't want to be disturbed. After that day, nothing was normal at home. At first, it was just little things. My toothbrush would go missing, the TV remote would appear on the other side of the room, and I started to think I was just being forgetful. My mom said I must be leaving things lying around, but I knew it wasn't that. Things were disappearing that I hadn't even touched. On the third night, the noise started. A light scraping, like someone was dragging their nails on wood, coming from downstairs, from the living room. I went down with my phone's flashlight in hand, praying it was just the dog. But the dog was in my room, sleeping at my feet. On the fourth night, I woke up in the middle of the night with a horrible feeling, like someone was standing next to the bed watching me. I opened my eyes and saw a shadow. It wasn't clear, but it was there. A figure standing in the corner of the room, motionless. I froze. I couldn't even blink. I just stared at that figure until it disappeared into the dark, as if it had dissolved into the air. After that, I started sleeping with the light on. But even then, I felt that weight in the air, like the atmosphere was denser, colder. I started hearing faint whispers only when I was alone. Voices that I couldn't understand what they were saying, but they seemed angry, furious. That's when it hit me. I had messed with something I shouldn't have. That tombstone, it wasn't just an old stone, it was like a barrier. And I knocked it down, broke it. Did it thinking it was a joke, but it wasn't. And now, something was coming after me. The days went by, and instead of things getting better, they only got worse. I couldn't sleep properly. I would wake up in the middle of the night with my heart racing, cold sweat, not knowing if it was a nightmare or if I had really seen someone standing there watching me in the dark. I started avoiding mirrors, walking quickly through the house's hallways even during the day, and any noise, any creak, made me jump out of my chair. My mind was in chaos. My parents noticed. My mom kept asking me what was happening, why I was so strange, why I had dark circles under my eyes and locked myself in my room. I just said it was tiredness, stress. But the truth is, I was terrified. Because deep down I felt that it wasn't over. That the thing I had awakened was still around, watching, waiting, like it had marked me in some way. And I carried that with me. I started avoiding going out at night. I distanced myself from my friends. Mike, Ryan, and Joshua pretended nothing had happened. None of them wanted to talk about that night anymore. And maybe that's why I was the only target of all this. Maybe because I was the one who knocked over the damned tombstone. To this day, when I close my eyes, I see that shadow. It doesn't speak, doesn't move, but it's always there. And I know that if one day I forget what I did, it will remind me. So if you're listening to this, listen well to what I'm about to say. No matter how stupid it seems, no matter how tempting it is, never mess with what's buried. Never disturb the dead, because they don't forget, and they don't forgive. What a horror. What did you think of the story? What rating from 0 to 10 would you give it? Leave your opinion in the comments below. There are things that simply have no explanation, like a coffin left at your door. But not every encounter with death is so direct. Sometimes it appears in a more subtle way, almost like a warning. Like in the story you're about to hear, where a girl appears on the side of the road, asking for help. But not everything is as it seems. I was heading home after a long day at work. It was past 11 at night. All I wanted was to get home, take a hot shower, and crash into bed. I took my usual route, a back road that cuts through a somewhat rural area. Hardly anyone passes by there at night. And at that hour, it seemed like the world had stopped. No cars, no sounds, just my car's headlights cutting through the darkness. The road was pitch black. All I could see was the white line on the asphalt, and the occasional glint of some animal's eyes reflecting in the bushes. The tall trees on either side seemed to close in over the road, like a tunnel. You know that kind of silence where even the car seems too loud? That was it. A bad feeling, a heaviness in the air, but I kept going, trying not to think too much. That's when I saw her. In the middle of the road, just standing there, was a little girl, out of nowhere, right there in the beam of my headlights. She looked about 8 or 9 years old, wearing a little white dress, long, messy hair. I slammed on the brakes, my heart racing. She didn't move, just stared at me. She didn't seem scared or lost. She seemed like she was waiting, like she knew I would pass by there. I opened the car door and asked if she was okay, if she needed help. But she turned her back and started walking, slowly, calmly, without looking back. And the strangest thing was that she headed straight toward the cemetery about 300 meters past the curve. I didn't even know there was still access there. That place had been abandoned for a long time. But she went. And for some reason, I still don't understand, I followed. I parked the car on the shoulder and followed at a slow pace. There was something about that girl, something that drew me in. When I got near the rusty cemetery gate, it was slightly ajar. The moon barely showed, but I could still see the crooked crosses and the old tombstones covered in weeds. The girl was already inside, and I went in. I entered that cemetery in the middle of the night, not knowing why. All I knew was that something told me I needed to see where this was going. I walked to where she was. She was right in the center of the cemetery, near a huge, cracked marble tombstone. The cold wind was making the trees sway, but she didn't move. She just looked at me with that fixed gaze, as if she knew exactly what was happening. That's when she spoke. Her voice, it didn't sound like a child's. It was as if it echoed, but clearly, and I could hear it perfectly, as if she were speaking inside my head. The tragedy is coming for you. Those words have never left my mind. When she finished speaking, I felt a chill so strong it gave me goosebumps from head to toe. And that's when something told me I had to get out of there, as if the place was closing in around me. I can't explain it, but it was an impulse. I ran back to the car without even thinking, as if the ground beneath my feet had started to tremble. I got in the car and didn't even look back. I just sped off as fast as I could. When I passed the cemetery entrance, I looked in the rearview mirror and she was still there, staring at me, motionless with that empty gaze. I just didn't want to know anymore. I wanted to forget all about it. I got home shaking in a way I never imagined I would. I couldn't sleep, you know. Those words kept echoing in my mind. I couldn't understand what had happened. How could a girl appear out of nowhere and say something so ominous? How did all this happen? I spent the night tossing and turning, thinking about her, the cemetery, those words. And then, the next day, the phone rang. It was my brother. His voice was muffled. It sounded like he was crying. "It's Mom. She passed away, man." Those words hit like a bomb. It couldn't be true. It just couldn't. My mom, who was always fine, who never had health problems, had passed away. It didn't make sense. The first thing I thought of was the girl, her words, the tragedy. It was as if everything had fallen into place in some strange way, as if she had warned me. And I couldn't ignore that feeling, that connection. I don't know what it was, but there was something supernatural about it, something I couldn't understand, but somehow knew was connected to my mother's death. I just don't know if it was a warning, some kind of sign, or if it was all just a coincidence I'll never understand. But one thing is certain. From that day on, the road, the cemetery, the girl, everything was etched in my memory in a way I'll never forget. I never took that road again. Not even if it was the shortest route. The idea of going near that cemetery where it all happened gave me chills. I just couldn't. Every time I thought about that path, those twisted trees, the rusty gate, I felt like something worse could happen, as if the place was marked, cursed in some way. And even now, after all this time, the feeling that it was a warning, a kind of gateway to something much bigger, has never left me. The impact of that night was profound. I felt different afterward, as if my life had changed, as if something had been taken from me. I didn't know if I had lost my mother or if I had lost something more, something invisible, but that had been haunting me since that apparition. The weight of it, the girl's words, stayed with me in a way I can't explain. And no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake it off, not just because of the loss, but because I knew there was something more involved, something beyond what my mind could process. That's when I felt the need to share what happened. I knew no one would believe me. No one would ever believe a story like this. But still, I felt like I had to tell it, maybe to try to understand, or maybe just to get it out of me. Because it's a strange feeling, you know. You start to think that the people around you might be seeing something you don't. Or maybe you were chosen to see something no one else will. I warned some friends, and of course no one believed me. Some even laughed at me, but I still say with all the certainty in the world, don't mess with things you don't understand. Don't risk going beyond what your mind can comprehend. I knew that cemetery had something beyond my reach, that the girl was just a link, a sign perhaps of something much darker, something that wasn't meant to be touched, that wasn't meant to be uncovered. And I, out of curiosity, ended up being pulled into it. To this day, I haven't found a logical explanation. I don't know who that girl was, why she appeared, or what that warning meant. I don't know if it was all a coincidence, or if something beyond the natural was warning me of the approaching tragedy. And the truth is, I may never know. The only thing I'm sure of is that, in some way, that night and that girl changed my life in a way I still don't fully understand. So if you ever pass by a place like that, don't doubt what you can't see. Maybe like me, you'll regret not heeding the warning. Chilling, isn't it? The scariest part is when what seems like a spirit turns out to be a tragedy about to happen. But what if the danger doesn't come from the other side, but from right here, when fear wears human skin? The next story brings a terrifying encounter with someone who seemed straight out of a nightmare and was armed with a machete. Everything started at my cousin Carla's birthday party. She's always been different, the kind of person who can turn even a simple family dinner into something unforgettable, though not always for the best reasons. That year she swore she'd throw the most memorable party ever, and she did. Just not in the way any of us expected. After the traditional happy birthday song and a few too many bottles of wine, the atmosphere was electric. Everyone was lively, talking loudly, laughing at the slightest things. That's when Ricardo, a friend of Carla's who always had questionable ideas, dropped the line that would change our night. What if we go for a drive to the old cemetery on the back road? The silence that followed lasted less than a second before turning into an uproar. Some laughed nervously, others looked concerned. But deep down, we all felt that adrenaline rush, the stupid urge to test the limits of fear. I looked at my wife, Anna, expecting to see that "no way" expression. But to my surprise, even she had a mischievous smile. "Let's go then," she said. "But we stay only half an hour, okay?" As if danger had a schedule. The car was packed. I was driving. Anna was in the passenger seat, and in the back were the birthday girl Carla and two of her friends, Lou and Marilia. The air inside the car was thick with excitement and a bit of alcohol, and as we left the city, the lights faded away until they disappeared completely. The old cemetery on the back road wasn't like those in the city, well kept and lit. No, this one was different. It was in the middle of a forest so dense that the trees seemed to lean over the road, as if trying to swallow anyone who dared pass by. Even with the high beams on, we could barely see beyond a few meters. The wind made the branches creak, creating shadows that moved in the corners of our eyes. When we finally arrived, the gate was open, or someone had broken in. The chains that should have locked it were on the ground, rusted, as if they had been broken a long time ago. "This is a sign," Marilia said, half joking. But no one paid attention. We were too caught up in that stupid excitement to notice the warnings. Inside, the cemetery was even creepier than it looked from afar. Ancient tombstones, some cracked, others covered in moss as if the earth was trying to pull them back down. The air was cold, much colder than it should have been at that time of year. And every step we took echoed strangely, as if something, or someone, was repeating our movements just behind us. Carla, of course, was the first to start the games. "Whoever hides best among the tombstones gets a round of drinks later," she shouted, and before anyone could think twice, everyone was running among the gravestones, laughing like children. Anna and I stayed a bit behind, but even we got caught up in it, telling ghost stories, making dare games. That's when we started to notice things. First, it was the sounds. Footsteps where there shouldn't have been anyone. Whispers that didn't come from any of us. Then, the shadows. I swear I saw something moving behind a distant tombstone, something not human. But every time I looked again, there was nothing there. "Let's go," Lou said suddenly. And for the first time since we arrived, no one argued. The mood had changed. The fear that was once fun now felt heavy, real. We walked back to the car in silence, all feeling that instant relief when the doors closed and the outside world was, at least temporarily, shut out. That's when it happened. We were almost out of the dirt parking lot when bam, an impact so strong it made the whole car shake. Something or someone had hit the window on my side hard. Before I could even process what was happening, my eyes met his. A man, or at least something that had once been a man. Shirtless, his torso covered in dark paintings that looked like they were made with charcoal or something worse. His eyes were two black dots, no whites, no life, but at the same time full of a rage that made my blood run cold. In his hand, a machete. Not one of those clean, shiny ones from the movies, but a work tool, dirty, stained, with marks I didn't even want to think about what they meant. He opened his mouth and let out a grunt that didn't sound human, followed by words I couldn't understand. A broken, guttural language, as if he had forgotten how to speak. My body acted before my brain could. My hand went to the door handle. I was going to get out. Help. Do. God. I don't know what I was thinking. My wife's scream cut through the air like a knife. "Don't open it!" And before I could react, I felt Carla's weight throwing herself on me, her arm crossing my chest like a human seatbelt. The doors locked with a sinister click, but the sound was drowned out by the deafening clang of the machete hitting the window again. The man, if we could still call it that, was possessed by an inhuman fury. His black eyes reflected the dim light of the car's dashboard, showing something that still haunts my nightmares. There was no fear there, no madness, just absolute determination, as if killing was the only thing that mattered in his universe. When I started the engine, it roared like a cornered beast. The reverse was so abrupt that the car kicked up dust, momentarily blinding our vision. Through the cloud of dust, I saw his silhouette recovering with a supernatural agility, the machete raised like a macabre trophy. "Go, go, go!" Lou screamed from the back seat, her nails digging into my shoulder. When I shifted into first and floored it, the car took off, leaving black marks on the ground. In the rearview mirror, I saw that figure running after us, not like a human, but with the disjointed speed of a predator, until it disappeared into the darkness of the cemetery. The silence inside the car was more terrifying than any scream. All we could hear was each other's ragged breathing and the creaking of the seats under trembling bodies. The smell of fear was palpable: cold sweat, cheap perfume, and the faint scent of urine. No one ever admitted it, but someone had peed themselves in fear. It was Anna who broke the silence with a question that would echo in our lives forever. What the hell was that? Her voice was unrecognizable, hoarse with terror. No one answered. What could we say? That we had seen a psychopath, a ghost? Something worse? My eyes met hers in the rearview mirror, and I saw the same thought. This wasn't normal. This wasn't human. When the city lights appeared in the distance, we should have kept going. But then Carla, still trembling, said, "What if we just take a look from afar, to make sure he didn't follow us?" The worst part? We all agreed, not out of courage, but out of that irrational fear that that thing might be crawling after us in the darkness. We went back like soldiers marching to their own death. The car stopped 50 meters from the gate, engine running, headlights off. The forest around the cemetery now seemed to writhe, its branches forming arms that invited us in. That's when we saw it. In the center of the cemetery, illuminated only by the moon that had finally broken through the clouds, a figure was lying on an old tombstone. It didn't move. It didn't breathe. It was just a dark stain against the white stone. But we all felt the same thing. It was watching us. Is that him?" Carla whispered, her icy fingers digging into my arm. Before we could answer, the figure moved. It didn't stand up, just its head turned at an impossible angle, as if its neck had been broken a long time ago. Even from a distance, I felt the weight of that gaze. I didn't wait to see more. The car lurched as I shifted into reverse, and this time we didn't look back. Years have passed, but none of us have completely gotten over that night. Marilia developed an anxiety disorder and moved to another city. Lou is still in therapy. As for the machete man, no police reports, no missing person cases that matched. I asked war veterans about the body paintings. Nothing. I consulted an anthropologist about obscure rituals. No leads. My theory? Sometimes in places where death piles up like dust in a forgotten attic, things wake up. Things that remember how to hunt, how to kill. And that night, out of sheer youthful arrogance, we knocked on the wrong door. Anna still wakes up screaming some nights, swearing she hears scratches on our bedroom window. I never stop at a gas station at night without first checking the surrounding bushes. And the old cemetery on the back road? It was demolished last year. They say they found strange things during the construction. Bones in unnatural positions, burn marks in geometric patterns. But that's a story for another night. How bizarre. Sometimes escaping real danger leaves invisible scars. But what if you entered a place where even time seems to refuse to pass? Where something ancient forgotten insists on manifesting itself? The next story takes you to a cemetery where the tombstones move on their own, and time simply stops. But before we continue with the story, if you've made it this far, it means you're enjoying our stories. So go ahead and like this video to let YouTube know you enjoy this type of content, and don't miss any more horror stories. I've always been the type to laugh at ghost stories. "Ah, that's just movie stuff," I'd say, sipping a beer with Mark at the corner bar. My brother was also part of the skeptic crew. To us, spirits were just the invention of impressionable or idle folks. That is, until one night in a stupid dare, we decided to put our certainty to the test. "How about we spend the night at Hillside Cemetery?" Mark blurted out with that grin of someone trying to act brave. "They say that place has been haunted since the 1800s, complete with shadows, the sound of a crying child, the whole cliché package." I just laughed. "Sure, man. Let's see if we can find the little Pac-Man ghost there." We arrived close to midnight. The old gate creaked as we entered, and the cold wind made us shiver a bit. But at first, it was all good. Too good, even. The cemetery just seemed like a bunch of old stones in the middle of the woods, with a faint moonlight lighting the paths. We even joked around, mimicking horror movie voices. "Oh, I'm the restless soul, give me back my gold." But then, as the hours passed, the atmosphere started to change. Around 3 a.m., I can't explain it, but something strange filled the air. We stopped laughing. Mark looked at me and whispered, "You feeling this too?" I just nodded. It was as if we weren't alone anymore. Something or someone was watching us closely. I looked back, expecting to see a beggar, an animal, anything that could explain that feeling. But there was nothing. Just the old, slightly crooked tombstones, as if they were smiling at us. And then, in the middle of the silence, I swear I heard a whisper. So low it almost went unnoticed, and the night had barely begun. That whisper came from somewhere among the trees, but when we turned to look, there was nothing there. Just the wind rustling the branches, making shadows dance on the ground. Mark took a step back and leaned against a tombstone, almost tripping. "What the hell is this, man?" he said, his voice a little higher than usual. Then came another sound. This time, it was like a low laugh, as if someone was laughing far away, but at the same time right next to our ears. I felt a chill run up my spine. This can't be happening, I thought, but it was real. And it got worse. Suddenly, Mark's phone vibrated in his pocket. He grabbed it to see if it was time to leave. We had agreed to stay until dawn, but we were already reconsidering. But when he looked at the screen, his blood must have frozen, because his face turned white. "Look at this," he said, showing me the phone's clock. 3:33 a.m. And the worst part? The clock was stuck. It didn't update, didn't change. Mine too. Even after restarting, even after taking it out of airplane mode, nothing. 3:33, frozen, as if time had stopped at that cursed hour, the so-called devil's hour. That's when Mark pointed to a row of distant tombstones. "Dude, look at the names there." We approached slowly, our hearts beating so hard I could hear it, and when we got close I almost fell backward. There they were, 2 tombstones side by side, our names, our birth dates. "This can't be," Mark said, his voice almost disappearing. I pulled out my phone right away and took a picture, illuminating the tombstones with the flash. The click echoed in the cemetery, and for a second I thought there would be some explanation, that it was a joke, that someone had put that there to scare us. But when we looked at the photos, nothing. The images were blank, just the black background, as if the camera hadn't captured anything. And when we tried again, the phone screen started flickering, showing for an instant a blurred figure behind us, a thin silhouette, with eyes glowing in the dark. Then we couldn't take it anymore. "Let's get out of here, now!" I yelled, and we ran as if hell had opened beneath our feet. But the cemetery wasn't going to let us leave that easily. We ran as if death itself was chasing us. And maybe it was. The wind howled in our ears, and every step we took echoed on the ground as if something was following, stepping in the same rhythm. Whispers came from all sides, words we couldn't understand, but that filled our heads with icy terror. "Close the gate! Close the gate!" Mark shouted as we jumped over the low cemetery wall, because we didn't even have time to open the lock. Only when we were already outside on the deserted street did we stop to breathe. My chest hurt, my legs trembled, and Mark was so pale he looked like he was about to faint. We looked back, expecting to see something, a shadow, a figure, any sign that we weren't crazy. But the cemetery was quiet again, as if nothing had happened. Just the gate creaking slightly in the wind. That's when Mark looked at his phone again. "Dude, the clock is working again." It was true. Our phones now showed 4:34 a.m., but we had run out of there around 3:40 at the latest. How had an entire hour passed in a matter of minutes? We didn't say a word on the way back. We just got in the car and drove away as fast as we could without looking back. The next day, with the sun high in the sky, we decided to go back. "There has to be an explanation," Mark insisted. "Someone played a trick on us, or we had some kind of shared hallucination." But when we arrived at the cemetery in daylight, everything seemed normal. The tombstones with our names? Gone. We searched the entire area, the oldest rows, behind the trees, every corner. Nothing. Just stones with the names of people who had died decades ago. Even the photos we had taken, the ones that had disappeared before, reappeared on our phones, but showing only normal tombstones without our names. Mark tried to rationalize. It must have been some light effect or a GPS glitch that put our data on fake tombstones. But his voice was weak, unconvinced. The truth is, we had no explanation. None. And the worst part? The feeling that something was still watching us hadn't gone away. After that night, nothing was ever the same. I've always been the skeptic, the guy who laughs at horror stories, who thinks everything has a scientific explanation. But how do you explain what we saw? How do you rationalize tombstones with our names that simply disappeared? How do you justify that voice whispering in the dark, the clock stopping at the devil's hour? You can't. Mark changed too. Before, he was the first to mock anyone who believed in ghosts. Now, he avoids even talking about it. Once, months later, we were drinking and I tried to bring up the subject. He tensed up immediately, his fingers trembling around the beer bottle. "Dude, don't talk about that, seriously." And I understood. That place had marked us in a way that couldn't be erased. We never found out what really happened that night. We researched the cemetery, looked for records of other people who had experienced something similar, but found nothing. No legends, no similar cases. Just silence and the certainty that something, or someone, had played with us that night. Sometimes when it's too quiet and I'm alone at home, I still feel that chill on the back of my neck. That feeling that something is watching me from the shadows. And I wonder, did we really escape from the cemetery that night? Or did a part of us stay there forever? The mystery will never be solved. But one thing I know now, the world is full of things we don't understand. And maybe it's better that way, because some doors we shouldn't have opened. How scary. What did you think of the story? What rating from 0 to 10 would you give it? Leave your opinion in the comments below. It was in 2020 that this strange thing started. Out of nowhere, I became obsessed with cemeteries. I can't quite explain why, but it was as if something was pulling my attention to those silent places, full of stories that no one remembered anymore. I spent hours researching online, looking at photos of ancient tombs, moss-covered headstones, those stone angels with empty eyes. But you know when the internet just isn't enough? When you need to feel the smell of the place, the wind hitting the back of your neck, that silence that seems alive? That's when I decided I had to visit one in person. I chose a cemetery near my house, nothing too scary, just one of those older ones, well kept, with tall trees and stone paths. I arrived there one late afternoon. The sun was already low, painting everything in a faint orange, almost golden. And man, what a strange feeling. The place was calm, but not in that peaceful way, you know. It was a heavy silence, as if the air was full of secrets. Surreal. I started walking slowly, running my fingers over the oldest headstones, trying to decipher the names worn away by time. But then, I felt it. That classic feeling, the one everyone knows but pretends they don't. The feeling that you're not alone. The hairs on my arms stood up. I looked back quickly, expecting to see someone, a visitor, a gravedigger, anything. But there was no one. Just the endless rows of tombs and the wind rustling the leaves of the trees. Still, I swore that something, or someone, was watching me. And it wasn't a friendly gaze, but I ignored it. After all, it was just a cemetery, right? Wrong. I kept walking, trying to ignore that feeling that something or someone was following me. That's when I saw him. A man, dressed in black, kneeling in front of a distant tomb, arranging a bouquet of dried flowers. Beside him, a dog, a somewhat scruffy mutt, sat quietly, as if also paying respects. The man didn't seem to notice me, and I didn't want to stare. A cemetery is a place of mourning, right? You can't just gawk at others like a tourist. So I just looked away, pretended to be interested in a nearby headstone, and continued on my way. But that dog, he looked at me. Not a normal look, of a curious dog. It was a fixed gaze, almost human, as if he was trying to warn me of something. Well, I ignored it again. I continued exploring, passing by the rows of tombs, until the sun began to disappear completely. The wind grew colder, and that feeling of being watched returned, stronger now. I decided it was time to go home. But then, on the way back, I passed by the same tomb where the man had been before. Only now, he wasn't there anymore. And the dog, oh my God, the dog. He was there, yes, but not sitting, not alive. He was hanged, piece of thick rope tied around his neck, the other end attached to the marble cross of the tomb. His body swayed slightly, his eyes still open, glazed, his tongue out. I screamed. It wasn't a scream of surprise, it was a scream of horror, the kind that tears your throat. I ran to him, my hands shaking, trying to untie the knot, but he was already cold, already stiff. It was too late. I looked around desperately, searching for that man in black. Where was he? What the hell happened here? But there was no one. Just me, the dead dog, and that tomb with a name I couldn't even read properly because the letters were almost faded. And then I noticed something. The flowers that the man had left before. They weren't normal flowers. They were funeral flowers, the kind you only put on a coffin. My heart was beating so hard I thought it would burst out of my chest. I looked all around, between the trees, behind the tombs, even at the road leading to the cemetery gate. Nothing. That man in black had vanished as if he had never existed. But he did exist. I saw him. The dog also existed, and now he was dead, hanging from that marble cross like a macabre trophy. I couldn't just stand there. I ran, almost tripping over the headstones until I reached my car. My hands were shaking so much I could barely grab my phone. I called the police, stammering, trying to explain what I had seen. When the officers arrived, two tough guys who looked like they had seen a lot of bad things, I thought they would think I was crazy. But they didn't. The older one just looked at the dog, sighed, and said, "Third one this month." I almost choked. Third? Did that mean this had happened before? The officer confirmed. Two other dogs had been found hanged on different tombs, always in the late afternoon, always with a perfect knot. No cameras caught anything. No useful witnesses. Just the bodies of the animals and the flowers. What flowers? I asked, remembering the bouquet the man had left. There are always some dried flowers on the nearest tomb. No fingerprints, no clues. It was as if the guy was a ghost. The police asked some questions, took my statement, but I could see they were as lost as I was. They promised to increase surveillance in the cemetery, but I knew it wouldn't help. Someone, or something, was doing this on purpose, and it seemed like they enjoyed playing with death. As they collected the dog's body, I looked again at that tomb, at the cross where the rope still swayed empty. And then I saw it. Marks on the marble. Fine scratches, as if someone had deliberately carved something there. I approached, running my fingers over the cold stone. It was a symbol. An inverted triangle with an eye in the center. And below, a word almost faded by time. She is watching. That image of the hanged dog wouldn't leave my head. Not when I closed my eyes. Not when I tried to sleep. I saw that glazed look, the purple tongue, the rope cutting into the neck. And I woke up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat. I went to a psychologist, took anxiety medication, but nothing erased what I had seen. It was as if that scene had burned into my mind. But you know what's even stranger? I kept going to that cemetery. Not every day, but almost. Sometimes in the afternoon, sometimes in the early evening. Always looking over my shoulder, always expecting to see that man in black again. But he never appeared. No dead dogs, no dried flowers, no new symbols carved on the tombs. Just the silence and the wind. The police never found out who did that. The case went cold, became just another file in some dusty drawer. But I couldn't forget. To this day, when I pass by that cemetery, I look at the gate and wonder, who was that man? Why did he do that? And the worst question of all, she is watching. Who the hell was she? Sometimes deep down I'm afraid that one day when I'm there again, alone among the headstones, I'll finally find the answer. And maybe she's been watching me all along. If you've made it this far in the dark, congratulations. You're the type who doesn't run when the story gets really scary. And if these cemetery tales have left you with that chill down your spine, and one eye open for the shadow in the corner of the room, then let's keep this journey going together. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next tales that will make you think twice before stepping into a cemetery after sunset. Leave a comment with "I see you," just so I know who made it to the end. And if this story stuck with you like an abandoned headstone, that like helps a lot to bring more mysteries like this. Oh, and if you're not completely scared yet, there's a video right here that will finish the job. Click on it and continue with me into this darkness.